Call to order the City Commission meeting of Monday, January 9th, 2017. I'll let the record show that all commissioners are present. First thing we'll look at is the order of business. Is there any changes to the order of business?
No, President Decker, there is no
Okay.
change.
All right. I guess then I would look for a motion to approve the order of business.
So moved.
A motion to approve it
Second.
and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Better do a roll call.
Not for that. The next. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda, is there anything on the consent agenda that commissioners would like to discuss?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion on consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Jennings?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll move right in. We have no timetable agendas this evening. So we'll move right into the first item. City Attorney Kripe is going to be talking about the FLSA 207K exemption.
Mr. President, members of the commission, this is the second reading of ordinance number 1626 regarding the changes to the code that were necessary to accommodate the fire department's switch to a 24-hour shift. And there have been no changes since the last reading.
Okay, is there anybody on the commission that wants to, or has any questions for Ms. Kripe on the exemption?
Move to approve ordinance number 1626.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion on 1626? We had the public hearing at the last meeting.
That's correct.
Yes. Hearing no further discussion, we'll take a vote. Mr. Altmans?
Aye.
Ms. Jennings?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The exemption is approved. Moving on to item B, we have an amendment to the sales and use tax removal. City Attorney Kripe will be handling that.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is the second reading of ordinance number 1626, which was revised or amended at the last meeting per your vote to tie the sales and use tax together at a cap of $100 per transaction. And this change again is being made at the request of the Office of the Tax Commissioner. And I did include some clarification in the memorandum that I'll just re-clarify for anyone who didn't have access to that or read that. But the tax department requires 60 days notice before they'll implement a change, and they implement them quarterly. And so we will have missed the deadline for the first quarter change, so they will implement actually in July 1 is what they're telling us. And so we'll submit that by their deadline of March 31st for the change to be enacted in July. And they'll do all the education and outreach to all the sales tax permit holders. So that's why they require that lead time.
Thank you, Ms. Kripe. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Ms. Kripe on the amendment to the tax cap removal? This is ordinance number 1627.
Mr. President, move to approve ordinance 1627.
We have a motion to approve. Second. And a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Ms. Jennings?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Moving on to item C, we have a liquor license transfer, and that's going to be presented by Chief Dossinger.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the commission. In your packet is an application to request a liquor license transfer from Dickinson Town and Country Liquors to Donlin Enterprises, which is Donna Linda Paul. The background investigation has been completed on Donlin Enterprises, and staff recommends approval of the transfer.
Okay, thank you, Chief Dossinger. Any questions for Chief Dossinger from the commission? Hearing none, I look for a motion to approve the transfer or disapprove.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Further discussion. Hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Jennings?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Next up is item D, and, well, this is the discussion on the Convention and Visitors Bureau, better known as CVB, board appointment. And that, can you give us a little background on that, Mr. Altman?
Each year, we reappoint new trustees, and so the board is made up of a configuration of local hotel managers and people in other industries, and this is to have Ms. Myron reappointed.
Okay, and Deputy City Administrator Carlson, you have any comments, or?
Nope, the only comment that I had is that this is a 2-year appointment for Ms. Myron.
Okay,
And she served on the board for a number of years. Does
Okay.
a really good job.
good. Any questions for Ms. Carlson from the commission? I guess what I'd be looking for is motion to consider the appointment.
Move to
CVB.
approve appointments.
All right, we have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Ms. Jennings?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Appointment is approved. Next, we'll move into reports. And I was remiss, and we do have a timetable agenda at 5 o'clock on here. On the printout I have here, it doesn't have it, but on this right here, we have Mr. Dean Summers. Am I correct?
I deferred that to next meeting.
Okay. So it was removed? Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So we'll move on to reports. You're going to handle the first part, Ms. Carlson?
Yes. Yes. Mr. President, Commissioners, I would like to introduce to you Robert Furman. He is our new museum director, and just wanted him to be able to state where he's from and why he's here, and that he can meet the commissioners too. Bob?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Furman. I'm your new director at the Museum Center. I'm just finishing up about 29 years in museums. I have a bachelor's degree in history and sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, a master's in public history from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, along with certification in museum studies. This is my 5th directorship. I have, as I said, I started in museums almost 29 years ago in 1988, quickly moved to an administrative track in 1990. I have run museums in Western Pennsylvania, Springfield, Ohio, Kenosha, Wisconsin, and most recently Superior, Wisconsin, where I was the executive director of the Richard I. Vaughan Veterans Historical Center. Except for those 10 years in Superior, my museum career is all in local history, and so this represents for me a chance to get back to my roots, so to speak, although this is my first time in North Dakota.
Good, welcome. We're happy to have you. I hope you're finding some interesting things that are,
Outside of the
unique.
snow?
yeah, yes, well,
No, it is very interesting. I'm getting a chance to get my feet wet. I've started, it'll be a week tomorrow. So just kind of getting my feet wet, enjoying it, and getting great help from city staff.
that's great.
And you have a murder mystery coming up on the 21st?
That's right. We have a murder mystery fundraiser. This is a participatory type event. People will register for the event. They'll be actually given a character that they'll portray that night. And we'll find out which one of them actually committed the homicide, so
Okay.
to speak. So it should be a lot of fun. And that'll give us a chance to raise a little bit of funds for our exhibition program.
Very good.
And is it, Bob, is that held at the museum?
Yes, sir, that is
Okay.
at the museum.
Any
Tickets
fa-
are
any
still
family?
available.
Beg pardon?
Tickets are still available.
Tickets
for
are
that.
still available. We need you to RSVP by the 13th.
Okay.
Do you have any family with you here?
Not yet.
Not yet,
My wife's
okay.
back in Wisconsin trying to sell the house. She'll
Okay.
be coming out shortly after. I think she's bringing the cat, but the kids are heading off on their separate ways now. We're going to be empty nesters, so
I'll bring extra clothes. It's not always this nice. It's going to get cold.
I take that in the spirit which it's intended. I appreciate the advice.
Superior, you're used to the cold.
Yes, the wind down off the lake can get pretty hefty, but not quite as hefty as you get here. So
Right.
that is a little bit of a challenge.
Welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. Carlson, you'll be handling the CVB agreement enclosure?
Actually, Mr. President, I'll be handling
Okay, you'll
this.
handle that, okay.
Commissioners, in your packets, you had information regarding the proposed changes to the arrangement between the Dickinson CBB and the city. Currently, or up until December 31st, the city had a funding agreement that set aside a certain amount of money every year that went to the Visitors Bureau. In speaking with the Visitors Bureau representatives, Mr. Kessel became aware they had a wish to discuss the possibility of moving from this set funding agreement to taking over essentially all or some portion of the occupancy tax as their budget. And they would operate within that, and there would be no more funding agreement between the city and the CVB. So if that were to happen, I guess the first question the commission would need to discuss is, do you want to continue under the agreement model that the last 5-year term just expired and continue in that way? Or would you want to shift to some model involving the occupancy tax being allocated by statute or by ordinance directly to the CVB? And if you decide to do that, there's the issue of what percentage or how you want to function that, if you want to cap on the amount that could be allocated every year, if you want a certain percentage and it just goes, so some discussion there would be necessary. And then the third issue that would arise is that the building that the CVB operates out of is owned by the city, and under the current funding model, they don't pay rent, there's no lease, there's just no arrangement really, the city just picks up all the costs of that. So if you would move to that occupancy tax model, what arrangement would you like for the building? And then as another issue that would be part of this decision-making process is there's a fund balance that has accumulated over the last several years that the city is in custody of. And that fund balance is around $440,000. And where that money is accumulated from is the excess of the occupancy tax over what the set funding model allocated to the CVB. And so that money's been set aside into that fund balance, and it can be used, the CVB can come ask for funds from that balance to do increased advertising, special events, promotions, so they have some access to it, but it is in the custody of the city. So there's some question as to whether you would want that balance retained by the city and continue that model of them coming to ask for specific allocations from that, if you'd want to turn that over to them, somewhere in between. And so there's quite a few decisions to make, but probably the first place to start is, do you want to continue with a funding model or a funding agreement, or do you want to discuss moving to an occupancy tax allocation?
I guess right now, I'd like to kind of defer to Mr. Altman, because he does sit on that, and
Sure.
what Ms. Kripe said was pretty accurate for what they want. Okay.
Yeah. You know, as a board, we met and we were looking at the renegotiation of the contract, and there were really a couple of options that were floated out there. One was a annual contract from the city, and with it and the event grants, it would be about $420,000 per year is what the city would put in our budget to do that.
And I think that's what we did appropriate last year for this budget.
Yep. And
How
so,
much was that tax? Yeah.
370,000 would come from the from the lodging tax, and then the 50,000 would have come from the hospitality tax.
And if I'm correct, and Ms. Carlson can correct me, I think that 370,000 there, last year's, or the collection estimate was not the full 370, so we were supplementing it a little bit
Correct.
with the reserves. that
Right,
we
with the
have.
reserves.
Yeah.
So,
So, the board met and we, had the choice of going with the 420,000 that would be guaranteed. When we met as a commission and we were looking at forward projections for that fund, Mr. Kessel was projecting lower occupancy rates and using reserves from the fund balance, and that we were going to do a 2-year contract, and that we would probably have to use some of the fund balance to compensate for where occupancy tax was coming in. So then that would be a budget item that we would have to discuss each year as we're doing the budget. Industry leaders came into the CVB meeting, and their feeling is that as an industry, they would like to take the chance of not having that guarantee of the 420,000, and instead they would like to rely solely on the 2% lodging tax as their main stream of income, thinking that if they have to take ownership for it, that as an industry they're going to work harder at increasing occupancy, and that they can make that fund work for them. They would want the assurance of having the fund balance available, so that if this next year occupancy is still down, that they have some reserves so that they can maintain the level of promotion and advertising that they are doing. But at this point, then at least we get to step away from having to come up with ways of funding this, because they're taking 100% ownership for whatever they generate with that. Lodging tax is their budget. They had done a good job in the past when that was the format of keeping money in reserve. As a commission, we changed that contract and we made them spend down their reserve as well. So they're the CVB's at a point where they have done all of that, spent down their reserve. And so I think it would be important for them to have that fund balance available. Doesn't mean that they're going to use it, but to have it available to them.
So to kind of summarize this part, they're expecting a neighborhood of 440,000. Okay, now if the 2% brings in, excuse me, the 2% brings in 400,000, they're going to ask for 40,000 out of the balance fund?
I would say that they actually want to have the fund balance transferred over to them so that they would have that available, because we don't know where projections are going to be for next year. If we make this switch, they will need to make budget out of whatever stream of income is coming in. And again, Mr. Kessel's projections for next year were somewhere in that 270 to 300,000 range. CVB and the industry thinks that they can do better than that, but that's the risk that they take.
Well, I agree, they would be assuming all the risk.
Right.
mean, they have to live within it. What I would not want to see is all of a sudden in 2 years, well, we made a bad, choice here, we need to come back to you for money. And then
Right.
everything's spent out of the balance and everything. And I guess that would be my caution then is do we maintain the 440 and allow them access to it? I'm not going to say restrictive access, but they have the ability that we at least know what. Say they burn through 140,000 the first year, then we at least can project what is happening.
Right.
Because we're not going to know now if they turn over the 2% gets turned over to the state, and they'll basically receive the funds. So we won't really know what the total is, or will we be able to?
You will in the annual report that the CVB
Okay,
by law has
okay.
to come and give us. So we would already know.
Okay, so we would have a ability to track it. So
Right.
I personally myself, it sounds good, the 2% to turnover. Right now, I would like to see us operate on a month-to-month basis for at least another month. Till, at least I do, I'd like to see some numbers and visit with Mr. Kessel on it. We can always take care of it after a month. The 400,000, which is maintained by the city, I'd like to see that remain with the city at this point in time also. As President Decker stated, you know, there's the balance of 440,000 in there, and after the year, we're down to 200,000. There's some people that are gonna want some explanations of that, and, no, that's not saying that you can't spend that much a year, but I think when you got a partnership of the city and the CVB, that if you're gonna spend that kind of money, that the city should know also, so we can address some questions that come to us. I'm not against it, I just think that I'd like one more month to take a look at some of these numbers.
Would we, excuse me, Mr. President, would we still require them to present us the budget at the beginning of the year?
Oh, yeah,
So, I mean, I guess we would know
exactly.
where it's going.
What
I mean, if they're
reserves were
presenting
gonna be
a budget
used and-
of 400,000, let's say, and they only collect 275, we'll obviously know where the money's going, correct?
Right.
And I guess this discussion would, this would lead to this discussion if we allow them the full 2% to operate off of. Going back to the building, I would prefer that if, you can see in the models that were presented in the, that there's some different funding schemes from different cities. And some of them give the whole thing, some of them give a percentage. I guess for me, if we allowed them to have the 2%, we allowed them to have 95% and we retain 5% for building maintenance, have a building maintenance fund. I guess it would essentially be a rent. At least that we have some kind of money that we can take care of the building, because right now, we don't have anything.
Right.
And I know, like, when I was working for the National Guard and we were working in the Armory, we got a pretty sweet deal from the city.
Right.
And then the boiler went out. So, to me, you know, and the city ate the cost of the boiler. So, I mean, that would be up for discussion, whatever you feel like. Or we could just say they have 2%, they have the whole 2%, 100%, and we come to some kind of lease agreement that a certain amount a month, that we put into a fund that basically goes back to the maintenance of that building. So at least we have something. Because right now, if I'm correct, we charge them nothing. Yeah. Is that correct, Terry?
Terry Thiel, Executive Director, Dickinson Convention and Visitors Bureau. And that is currently correct. We don't pay rent on it. The building was constructed through hospitality tax funds back in 2000. We haven't had anything major, but I'm not going to disagree at that point that couldn't happen. I would make the assumption probably that would go back into hospitality tax dollars if, say, the boiler or, you know, not the boiler, excuse me, but the furnace or something went out. But yeah, currently we don't.
Yeah, and I guess that could be in the agreement too, that,
Right.
that you guys take care of the, whatever maintenance issues.
Yeah, and we have anything like we painted a few years ago, that's our cost, anything like that. You know, we have lights that go out or, you know.
And how old is the building?
It was constructed, we moved in 2000, so we constructed in 1999.
I was just wondering roof-wise, you know, what shape the roof's in.
Yeah, and
what shape air conditioning, heating.
Yeah, and actually, right now, I don't know, we haven't had any problems with it at this point, but I'm gonna guess maybe at some point it could,
We're approaching 20 years.
yeah, actually, we are.
Terry, can you give a recap as to how the board and the industry came together to decide that they would rather go back to the 2% funding model?
Yeah. Well, the contract that we have is the first contract that we had experienced, and it was for the 5 years. So before that, we had had all the 2%, and we had had a portion of the hospitality tax also that we operated on. So once this was coming to an end, we actually had the board retreat last year, where the board wanted to see the funding go to for operating and marketing and all that. And we had set it at that time, at $500,000 to be compounded 5% per year, that being broken down into marketing, to be increased, and obviously some admin within that. So we went through the year with that, and then met individually with commissioners, and we met city administrator and such, and went through that. I also presented the information at our monthly hotel GM meetings, just so they're aware of it. It's their dollars that they're collecting, you know, on behalf of the visitors. And so I know there was discussion with the GMs also that they would like to see that the marketing is increased, and that the funds go, the 2% would go back to the CVB.
What is your estimate the 2% would bring?
It depends on the ADR and also the average daily rate and also the occupancy. This year we were down probably about just over 7% than last year, but the occupancy was quite a bit less for the dollars collected, and that's because the average daily rate was much, much lower. So actually those are the factors that take place with that. Last year we had, it was a collection of just over 600,000, and this year I think it'll be about 361,000. So it's a difference depending, like I said, on your rates that occur. So it's a combination of one of those two.
Like I said, I'm fine with the 2% if that's the route you guys want to go, and you know, but it's up to the commission. You guys decide that. I guess with the fund balance of the 440, and that we kind of discussed that before you guys came in. Is it something that, I guess from what Mr. Altman said, is that you guys want to kind of take ownership of, Mr. Steiner, to paraphrase, said if we'd like to maintain it and just you guys have access to it. Would that be acceptable?
I believe it would be. Obviously, you'd have to visit the board, but I don't see that there'd be any reason not to do that. It's the accessibility of it, I think, that is, you know, that we would have.
To you, it doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
in the city bank account or the CVB bank account, as long as there's access.
Correct.
Ms.
Correct.
Peel, I know you guys were asked to spend down reserves at one point. What were your reserves?
It was roughly, I think, just over 200,000. We spent between 70 and 90,000 a year to augment that 320. So we ran anywhere from 404 to 428.6 for a budget this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what we did. We took that. We've kept emergency reserve though also, just so you're aware, you know, between 50 and 100,000. But that other amount, we did spend that, and that went into marketing. And I also have, and I'll pass out, it's information that I had collected from other CVBs, and this is for how they collect it, and also on how they take care of their buildings or their different, you know, how that's treated with that. So I'll hand that out to you too when we get done, or I can do it now.
Go ahead.
Terry,
Yep.
So we have
Terry, do
some-
you have a year-end balance statement, financial statement?
We do. We have the balance sheet each, yeah, we do. I don't have it with me right now.
Can you get that to Sean so he can get it to us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Mr.
So what,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. What I did was, I had gotten information from what other CVBs had sent to me. Maybe a couple of them I just took off the treasurer's office, because some of those you can get the lodging with that. And so Devil's Lake, you'll just see on there, there's an asterisk in there. Currently, they are paying back the city of Dickinson, and that is because there was a discrepancy with the tax department, so there's a little bit different numbers there. So I put down the 2% lodging with that, and then what they get according to percentages, the 100%. We'll see that Williston is 95%, and then Bismarck is at 85%. But at the bottom, you'll also see Williston is 5% to the Armory, and they do that because of the visitor activities that are there for the Armory's curtains and different things that are set up for public events. And then Bismarck is 15% back to the Civic Center for promotion and marketing events back for what they do there. And the reserve, if there's anything reserved, goes back to the CVB. So you'll see where that's kind of in line with that 100%. I mean, the occupancy that is usually always turned over to a CVB. There are some that collected directly through their city, and then there's some that are sent on to the state, and that's down at the bottom also, revenue origins with that. And I did combine Bismarck, Mandan, Fargo, West Fargo, Moorhead, and then also Jamestown, because there's a split up just a little differently, and primarily because Bismarck is Bismarck, Mandan, CVB, and then Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead, because they're all
I was
close
just gonna
with
ask that question, if they were all under one roof.
Yeah, they are. Now, Williston's is a little bit different. It just happened with them that their visitor center, they split theirs up a little bit, so they keep some of the, just the visitor staff at their center, and then I think their executive director is at their city. So they break theirs down that way. The other incomes you'll also see, some get all the hospitality money, as does Devil's Lake. Grand Forks does some membership. They're quite a bit larger. They also get 3% of East Grand Forks lodging, do some car rental at the airport, Minot car rental. Williston has gaming, and then membership and gaming for Bismarck Mandan, a housing bureau for Fargo. But that basically, what they said was a wash, because they also employ a staff for about that amount of money. So it didn't really amount to a lot. And then you'll see Jamestown, how they break down theirs with the hospitality tax also. And then, of course, where they'll keep their reserves for their income, where they try to keep it at a, whatever level they've determined, and then their total income with that. They'll probably have a little bit on gift shop sales. It's not a whole lot that does anything. And then the other page that you'll see is what they do with their buildings and how they treat that. And the ownership with that, how it was paid for most of them. Lodging tax, 1% lodging tax, some was donated. And then with the city, with the utilities and who pays that, the rent. The only one that pays rent would be Bismarck. Insurance is covered on that, mechanical, CVB responsibilities, and also out to the landscaping.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Friedrich.
do we know what it costs us to operate that building? Do we break that out, or?
The utilities approximately just over $3,200 a year. Prior to this past agreement, we paid the utilities, which, looking back, in essence, it comes out of the same fund. So it's still, the building doesn't cost resident taxpayers any money.
You said it's paid for. It was paid for in the past, right?
Yes, through the hospitality tax. So I would say if somebody went to eat or drink or whatever, it was paid through that tax and or lodging tax with that. So right now, it's the utilities, because we pay the insurance, we pay whatever maintenance right now. And even with the utilities, as I said, it's really an in and out, because it comes out of the same fund, which would be through visitor payment.
So if we would go with the 2%, allow you to have the full 2%, you would incur your utilities, because there is no other payment, essentially.
Right.
And then you would maintain at least some maintenance. I guess that could be part of your reserves, a maintenance to take care of if there is any maintenance. Because if I understand correctly, we do own the building, the city does, right?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, in essence, that's what has been historically taken place. It would be really no different.
Okay.
If you were interested in a triple net lease, that would make me feel a little better with giving you more control of the 440,000 in the reserve fund that we have.
If it was what? I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part.
If you would take on a triple net lease, means you do all repairs,
Oh.
insurance, everything. I would feel more comfortable, giving you more money out of the fund balance, being that you may need that money. If you don't want to take a triple net, then we have to look ahead and say, we need to keep some of that 400 in our own fund in case we do the maintenance, we do the new boiler, the electrical, whatever.
Would we do that out of the 2%, or would that come out of the hospitality? Because that's where the funds came to build the buildings. That's probably where any maintenance issues would come in. It's still supported by their efforts in their industry. It's just the alcohol, food, and those sales. And so,
Well, the building was built with the 1%
1%,
on
right.
utility tax.
right.
Okay.
So why wouldn't that be the fund that?
Well, you know, that's something we have to look at in your guys' budget.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, you know, if we don't do something like a triple net and that 440,000 is gone, all of a sudden, we don't have a fund or reserve put aside for maintenance and we're stuck with it.
Unless we use the 1%, as Clayton said.
Right.
Are we looking at a rent amount? Or just, are we worried about maintenance? Because triple net is like property tax, which I'm imagining there's no property tax.
There are no property taxes.
Insurance, they're already paying.
Insurance, minimal, minimal.
Whether you're.
Insurance, the city's paying on that building.
No.
No,
No, they're-
CVB is.
You're paying the?
Yeah, they're already paying the.
So you got part of the triple net there.
So what's left then? I mean, there's, maintenance would be the only thing really left.
What I'm saying here is, do we want to get rid of the 440,000 and then something else come along and we don't have a fund set up for? Which we do for every other building in this community. We have funds set up for maintenance. We have line items for maintenance, for repairs, and so on.
Mr. President, when you suggested the 95% to the CVP with a possible 5% for rent, that would put you roughly at, if the sales tax raised 400,000, it would be roughly 20,000 a year and 1650 monthly. So that is an option for a maintenance fund if you wanted to suggest that, but you can also look at the hospitality tax for taking that fund out of there. Personally, I am a proponent of giving them the full 2%. I think that that's what that money was initiated for, so that's what it should be used for. And I think they take on a lot of responsibility with the building, so if we can work in a maintenance fee or some sort in there, I think that would be a fair deal.
I think we still need to have a fund balance.
Well, I think
If we wouldn't have kept this fund balance here, it would be gone. And now they have a situation coming up where the taxes are down. Hospitality
No, it
taxes
wouldn't have
down.
been,
There's nothing in
because
there.
if we had not changed the contract, they had been good stewards of the money and they had kept a healthy reserve. And so this 440 is just money that they earned as an industry that we never gave them. We held on to it. But they held on to quite a bit in reserves, and when the contract changed, we made them spend down. Otherwise, they would still have their own personal reserve as well.
And that's how I see it as well, that I think they were pretty responsible with how they manage their money, so we have some good faith in them.
Terry, how much cash you guys have in the bank?
I guess I think there's, we have the reserves of 50, right now it's probably about 130, I'd have to look.
What do you have in CDs or other investments?
50.
50, so you got a total of 100-some thousand.
You know, I'd have to look to be sure. I'm not going to guarantee. I'll get you the numbers on it, but.
How much did we ask you to pay your reserves down every year?
Oh, it wasn't per year, but it ended up being between 70 and 90 a year that we did. So.
Because the reserve mandate was to have you get your
Yeah.
reserves down to that 50 to 100 mark. And so with the contract, we set the contract knowing that it was a budget shortfall for them and made them spend down the reserves. So they've cashed CDs to keep
Keep their
the
budget
income
balanced.
level
Yeah.
balanced.
We've used cash on hand every year.
And
Yeah.
Commissioner Ullman's, was that was asked because it was taxpayer money, right? And it wasn't meant to be in a savings account, am I understanding that correctly?
What, you had kind of the perfect storm of high room rates, high occupancy rates, so a lot of cash coming through the 2%. And the CVB, you know, did not spend all that money down that was coming in. They did have it in reserve. And so they were good stewards of their money. And, you know, that perfect storm was short-lived. And now we're facing, how do we get occupancy back up? How do we attract? How do we do that? And That's why I think it's important, you know, the fund balance is there because we didn't give it to them, but it would still be there with the CVB because they had been good stewards of the money all along. So that doesn't concern me, I guess.
I guess we need to kind of wrap this up and look at, I think the consensus is we're fine with the 2%. I'm not gonna, until we vote on it, but, ultimately, one of the things we left out of here is the event grant. I think that was part of the discussion also. If we were gonna give them a percentage of the 1% for events.
And it was a straight figure of $50,000 out of the hospitality tax.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, historically, it had been 60 since the fall of '97 when it started. And then last year, we came to the city commission and had asked for 80,000 to increase for what we had developed as a block grant. If an organization had multiple events that they wanted to apply for, we put 20,000 for that. So we'll go from 80 to 50.
And 25 of that, the city's going to start picking up the tab for
First on first.
And that's why that 50, even though historically it's less than what they had been getting with the city taking on the 25, it still balances out. So they have trimmed their budget and they're working within, you know, think realistic budgets. But those grants are the ones that are bringing in the huge American Legion baseball tournament 2 years in a row coming up. That's a huge impact to the hotel industry because that's multiple rooms. And so we've got to do the promotion, but we also have to have the event money to bring so that we can bid on events. And, you know, we're in competition with Bismarck and Williston and those communities to get the conventions here.
And I've had conversations with Terry too about how I'd like to just see them expand too, pursue other things.
Yeah, and it takes money. I mean,
Right.
it's, you know, one of the things we're doing now that we didn't do even 5 years ago is the online marketing. And that's,
Should be cheaper than print though, right?
but it isn't.
Okay. I guess then what we need to come to is, because basically to draw it up for the next meeting. Am I correct, Ms. Kripe?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The staff needs direction as to the nature of the ordinance that would be drafted to allocate the occupancy tax and any other allocations the commission would choose from the hospitality tax or what have you. And then I guess the other thing that we would need some direction on is if you do that allocation and we do draft that ordinance, do you want us to put together some kind of lease and try and do some negotiating with the CVB to present that to you at the next meeting, or what do you want to have happen with the building?
I was not under the impression that it was built from the hospitality tax and that was its purpose. So, you know, I see there's other cities that Fargo, the building is owned by the city. Grand Forks, the building is owned by the city. Dickinson, Bismarck, and the only one out of the four is is Grand Forks and Bismarck, where Grand Forks charges $1 a year, and Bismarck is $1,600 a month. I'm not sure how Bismarck's building, how that was built, but I'm in favor of looking at $1 a year. I think that's fair. Since
And
it is-
using hospitality tax for any major issues that come up with it.
what is our maintenance fund for the community center? Where does that come out of? There, Ms. Kripe, do you know?
I don't, does that under the Parks Department? Or is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought we had a maintenance fee that.
We do set aside some money, out of the 1%, half of the 1% or whatever it is.
Right.
And we do set some for the maintenance of those buildings, yes.
Maybe that would be something to look into.
What about like the museum? How do we pay maintenance on that? Is that self?
That comes out of the hospitality tax, not the occupancy, but the hospitality to maintain that building for the museum. That's what it's set aside for.
I'm assuming that there's an ordinance, or at least a memorandum of understanding on this situation. I can't remember it, and I haven't read it lately, and I doubt if you guys have either. So I don't think we need to make any decision tonight until we're at least given the financial statements, copy of the ordinance, so we can see exactly, like you said, what was intended for. I can't remember what the city's portion was, what they were keeping for their intentions, but I would have to say that it's addressed in there. So, you know, again, I'd like to see, let's take a look at it. We got 30 days to take a look at it. If we need to have a couple meetings with Mr. Kessel and Terry and so on, then that's good. I would rather do that than make some decisions tonight and know it's completely opposite of whatever the ordinance says for this here.
Well, I think it's safe to say we can give them some direction in that they want to live by the 2%. That we would be okay with that, direction-wise. But again, and that we would provide them with an event grant out of the hospitality tax. That amount can be negotiated, whatever. I mean, right now it's sitting at, you know, debate is 50,000, and what are we going to do the first on first? We can come to an agreement with that. I'm personally, I would like to see some kind of rent, but that money I would say would be dedicated to a maintenance fund to take care of it. But if we do come to the understanding that the hospitality tax can, or was designated towards what you said in that ordinance, maybe part of that hospitality tax is dedicated in the ordinance to paying for the maintenance. So that might alleviate that anyway. And then, my understanding is as long as we maintain the fund balance and you have access to it, you're okay with that. So,
You know, I just think we just need to sit down and decide who's going to do what and so on. And
sure.
I
Okay.
really don't have a problem with it. I just want to make sure we, you know, grabbing
Yeah.
something here and there and we don't know for sure.
Is that sufficient in guidance-wise? Starting with the 2%, we'll negotiate the event out of the hospitality, look into what the hospitality tax originally, when it created the building, if there was any language in there that pays for maintenance or whatever, there might be some language in there. And if Carson doesn't remember, and he's been here forever, then we probably do need to look in it. So, and then the fund balance, they're in the agreement that as long as we maintain it, they have access to it. I think we can draw something up, get it to a meeting here.
Okay.
And just for point of information for everyone to take a look at over the next few weeks while we draft ordinances and things, Section 35.125 of the Dickinson Municipal Code is what addresses the hospitality tax. And I think what Commissioner Steiner is referencing is a rather vague statement, kind of in the middle. It just says a portion of the proceeds will be deposited in the visitor's promotion capital construction reserve account. But it doesn't say how much, it just says a portion.
But
So,
that's for construction, capital.
yeah.
It doesn't say anything about maintenance.
Could be a larger facility in combination with another organization.
So we
Could
may
be
need to look
anything.
at that also. And then there's another caveat in there that it says a portion not exceeding 25% of the total revenues will be dedicated to a grant program for special projects and programs. So
Okay.
we'll need to make sure we're taking a complete look at everything to be amended as we go forward.
Okay.
For me, I'd like to see how we're handling maintenance on all the other city-owned buildings. If we're taking the museum and some of those other out of the hospitality tax, I don't see this as being anything different.
Right. Okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay.
You good with that, Ms. Trey? Ms.
Yeah,
Steele?
thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Ms. Steele.
Mhm.
Ms. Kripe, you're going to move on to City Commission email, open records.
Yes. Mr. President, members of the commission, this commission has expressed a strong desire to ensure transparency and openness in the procedures of the body. And one of the ways we can do that is to operate under city email accounts. And right now, I believe all of you are operating with a private email account that the city uses to communicate with you and that you use to communicate with constituents and with each other if need be. So what my recommendation is to help the city respond timely and completely to open records requests is that if you have any city business being conducted, that you use those city email accounts that are being created for you. The city will use them to communicate with you. We can put them on the website for constituents to access, and it will alleviate a lot of your personal emails being commingled with city emails, and it makes it a lot easier for us to respond to open records requests and making sure that we're getting every record. Right now, if anyone would request emails between any of the commissioners or involving any of the commissioners, if it doesn't come from a city email account, we don't have access to it without going to each individual commissioner. And as you all know, this is not your full-time job, and when we start responding to open records requests, it can get quite tedious, and we do have a responsibility to respond quite timely to those. And so it's just an effort to improve that process.
And those are established now? We just need to log in and?
We did create them for everyone. We'll email out passwords to you. It's just an initial password, and then you can go in and reset it for yourself, and then you can operate on them as you see fit. Again, it's not a mandate or anything by any means. It's just a tool we're creating for you to, you can put that on the website. You can put it on your, I know some of you have individual commission Facebook pages. You can make that accessible without putting your personal email account on the web. So.
Be great.
Perfect. I'd actually prefer that.
Any concerns from commissioners? I guess my only concern would be the access to that account. I know there's open records, and we don't know who can request an open record. My concern would be within the city itself, that we don't have anybody within the city just going in and just because they want to look, I guess.
Sure.
Without an open records request.
And one thing we had talked about was possibly an implementation of some administrative policy that if someone, inside the city would make a request for any commissioner's records or emails, they have access to them under open meeting and open records laws, but we would have some record of that. And one reason in particular is that if you would have any communications regarding any employment issues, things like that, where an employee would reach out to a commissioner directly, we don't want necessarily any supervisor to be able to make those open records requests, because open records requests can be made verbally, and then there's no record of who requested them unless the person responding actually keeps a log, which everyone is supposed to be doing, but sometimes when someone asks you in the hallway, I know how things can go with that. So those written requests would help us log and prevent retaliation in the event of an employee concern being released to a supervisor.
That would be my concern there, so.
And then we would just log in through the city website?
Right.
To
Yep.
gain access to it?
Yep, if you go onto the city website, there's a tab on the top for employees, and there's a webmail drop-down, and you can just log in on there, and you can also put it on your phones.
Okay.
Any other questions on the email for Ms. Kripe? Now, Ms. Carlson or Ms. Kripe, are you going to be handling the January meeting schedule?
I can take it if you want.
I can take that one.
Okay.
Mr. President and Commissioners, we're asking that for the January 23rd meeting be rescheduled for January 24th. On January 23rd, there is the Southwest Legislative going on in Bismarck. We are preparing to have a booth down there and promote with our legislators of all the projects that they have helped with state funding and stuff, and we would like to be down there for that. So we're asking and requesting that we have the meeting on the 24th instead of the 23rd. And I don't know if you want to look at your calendars or how you want to do this, and then
I would also
That's a good
interject on
idea.
this, that we would like the commission members to be there.
On the 23rd.
On the 23rd, down in Bismarck. And I talked with Mr. Kessel earlier for arrangements that we're down there. I think it's something that we should all attend. I attended 2 years ago at the time with the mayor, Dennis Johnson, We're the only two, I think, in attendance. I don't know,
I was there.
were you there? Okay, Mr. Steiner was there too. I think we were the three that were in attendance. And I think it's important to go to.
And what
We
time?
get our message out to the legislature, so.
And we're putting together a very nice booth with aerial canvas pictures, plaques, and things that we've done, and we've got a big thank you. So we're working hard to make it look very nice, and then possibly a raffle on one of our canvas pictures, so that to draw them to our booth and stuff. And as I understand, there hasn't been a booth before for quite a while. So this is going to bring them towards us too.
I don't remember one last session.
What would the hours be for this?
I think they have a social at 5:30, which is Central Time, and then 6:30
Sounds
supper.
about right, I think. And one thing I'd like to interject too, President Decker, is we can plan on having the van go down there, so those that wanted to ride in the van, we could drive it down and back that night.
Okay.
Can I get those hours again, please?
I think it's 5:30 is the social starts, and we're at the Ram Coda across from, the Ram Coda's across from the mall, if I'm correct. And then 6:30 is the supper, which basically everybody just mingles with all the different, and then there's some entertainment they set up and stuff. And there's some presentations. It's worthwhile. So check your schedules. I guess the main thing is that we would look for a motion to move our date from the 23rd to the 24th for the commission meeting.
Correct.
And there's one other date we need to change, and I don't know, can we put them together? We're closed on Martin Luther King Day, and that's the day scheduled
16th.
for the alcohol. The 16th?
Yes.
And the city is actually closed that day, so we
Correct.
probably need to move that to the 17th. Can we do that as one motion, move both dates? If that's okay with the commission. I mean, you have any objections to moving that to the 17th?
No.
How about the 24th? Are we good on the 24th then too?
Yeah.
I guess then I would look for a motion to amend the dates.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
We have a motion to amend the dates and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Ms. Jennings?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Change the dates. Moving on, unless you have anything else, Ms. Carlson. Okay. Moving on, Chief Seevock. You have a 2015 Fire Code adoption and amendment.
President Decker, City Commission, tonight we want to present the amendments to the 2015 code before adoption for first reading. Fire Marshal Mark Selly has worked diligently on this with City Attorney Kripe, and I think that it would be to my benefit to just turn it over to him at this time.
Basically, this is adopting the 2015 IFC International Fire Code. A lot of the amendments that you'll see in there are to become in line with the International Building Code, which is to take effect the first of the year.
Could you just state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
For the public.
Yep,
So,
Mark Selly, I'm the fire marshal with the
Okay,
fire
thank
department
you.
here. Anyway, it's to amend the fire code to line up with the building code and also to line up with the century code. There's some changes that according, for certain definitions of daycares and such that the building code that does, so we try to align our code with that as much as possible. And a few minor changes with how we operate with the certain items as far as building construction. The other one, the big one that we have in here is actually the removal of sales of fireworks within the city limits. Back to the way it used to be before the North annexation. Getting rid of that mixed message that's given to the citizens that they can buy in town, but they cannot use in town. So it's just kind of making it's back to the way it used to be, the same message of you can't use them in town, you can't buy them in town. Just trying to make a consistent message. And if there's any questions on a particular adoption or amendment, let me know and I can try to explain those to you.
everything in red in here is what is?
Anything in red is additions. Anything that's,
Okay.
in red and is, Xed out is deletion.
Okay. So like the daycare additions, have the local daycares been notified to the?
That is nothing new that we've had.
Okay.
That is to match the city, or the state ordinance or the state code for how many kids or the definitions for.
So they're pretty aware of the state or the
Yeah.
state
Yeah,
code?
we're right in line. It's no changes, nothing for our daycares. We've addressed that in years past, and that we've gotten that into line, I think 2 years ago, alignment on that.
And the 503.2.3, I know you don't have it in front of you, but
I do.
the fire apparatus access roads, how are we going to, I guess, enforce that? And, because I know we do have some
Right, and that's.
substandard.
Right, and that's gonna be dealing with anything new construction. It's
Okay.
basically anything new, if there's a fire access road required. The code was vague, it said it need to be a approved, access road. Didn't really say hard surface or either way. We've always addressed it as being a hard surface road. We just wanna clarify it so that the citizens know or the contractors know that when it's built, it's either gonna be concrete or asphalt.
Now, does that address anything of current construction where they say they've let it fall into disrepair?
It will. If it's in disrepair, that's something we can address, because it was hard surface at the time. We haven't addressed anything if it's gravel now or not hard surface. We're not gonna address anything until they do a remodel or addition, and then that would be addressed at that time.
Because I'm sure there were some concerns the other night or a while ago in that trailer park fire
Yeah.
with the streets there.
And we have letters on files with them that they've worked on repairs on those roads down there. They've gotten better. They're not the best, but they're better.
Pretty congested area down there, so.
President Decker and Commissioners, in any areas like that, if there's an area within the city where the roads are in disrepair and it's a private road, the fire code does come into play then. And we do bring that to you, to engineering, and to Public Works. And generally, a lot of times, the power of the knowledge that that's going to be made public helps us to move the owner forward to make the necessary repairs. Unfortunately, sometimes it has to come to that, but that is how the code would work in that process. But
Because-
usually, those are the private road situations.
Yeah, because I think on private roads, we really can't, as Public Works, we really can't make them adhere to anything other than their fire code.
Correct, I would say fire code or maybe if it's a trailer court, Department of Health license of some
Okay.
sort.
So the most of this, though, is just getting the fireworks out of the city.
That's the big one. That's the big one that's changing, yes.
Right. And we don't have any agreements with any of these entities that sell now within the annexed area, that they're allowed to stay there?
The one that was possibly an issue, and I've been talking to staff in the development department that trying to find an agreement, and they were aware of anything, but I haven't had a chance to do a thorough search yet. But I'm not aware of anything at this point, and the one that was selling within that area, but now outside the limits of my understanding. So.
We had last fireworks season.
Last year we had 4 locations in town. It all started, initial when it was allowed in Salem, it was, we were at 2. And because we allowed that to increase up to 5 flash construction at State Avenue, we reduced it on 4. But it's all because of the annexation, it's increased our volume amount of sales, and it's just opened up more.
Any other questions for Mr. Shelley or Chief Seabuck, Commissioner? Thank you, gentlemen. And since this is, what's the ordinance number, sorry?
The ordinance number 1629.
1629. Since this is the first reading, we will have a public hearing. Anyone from the public wishes to come forward, please come forward, state your name, and concerns about ordinance 1629. Seeing no one from the public, we'll close the public hearing. Any questions by commissioners, for staff, either fire department or anyone else involved in this code amendment?
I make motion to approve first reading of ordinance number 1629.
A motion to approve 1629.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, vote. Ms. Walton? Ms. Dennis?
Aye.
Mr. Snyder? Mr. Furter? Chair votes aye. Motion passes. We're going to move on. Okay, nothing from Chief Costner, nothing from engineering. Public Works, Mr. Ross, operations update.
President Decker and Commissioners, thanks. I just wanted to bring tonight some statistics on the recent snow events and maybe some operational status of where we're at and some things we learned over the last couple storms. So I don't want to bore you with statistics, but a couple things that I have that I find interesting to you in public is, for example, the salt design to have 600 points of salt. We've gone through 800 tons of sand. One of the interesting things we used, Brian, on the first storm, the last storm, because of the weather, the temperature, we didn't use as much Brian, we used pre-weighting sand and salt. But we used, so far this snow, for this winter, we used 8,000 gallons of Brian, along with approximately $20,000 in fuel for the last 3 storm events. And pay edges on the blades and plows, everybody's going with those. So far, they've used 85 for the edges. And that's quite significant for snow events, and we're only in January. A couple other things I wanted to discuss. We've had about 1,500 hours of overtime so far, 1,500 hours of regular time spent from the street department, water utilities, solid waste, on renewable, and contract hours are about approximately 350 contract hours that we use so far.
Mr. Ross, 350 contract hours. Do we have an estimation on the cost?
It'd be $150 an hour for man, and we're across the board negotiating with all the contractors, so it's $150 across the board. some of the things that we weren't prepared for, a lot of new areas of development with pavers, not knowing how the building's blown, the wind and everything else. We've got a lot of pavers out there that are a lot of snow. We ordered numerous pavement markers out, so that's one thing. They weren't there, I guess, since the storm. We've got a lot of new development we're dealing with that. We're also looking at additional snow storage sites. A couple that we've used on a regular basis in the past are being full. To date, we've hauled about 3,200 loads of snow, which is 80,000 cubic yards of snow we've hauled so far, and we're looking to have it hauled considerably more. We're looking at a site by Dixon State. They're at least that will allow us to do snow or have snow stored there. We're looking at our property up on 29th and 30th, the middle school. We're going to open that up soon for additional snow storage site, and so we're going to.
I was meaning the other day, and reading in the hospital, was that what you like to do?
Yes.
You said that the line from the hospital goes on belt.
If we're looking at that area, some of those areas would be significant, some have utilities in there, and first time this time of year, I don't want to find the way we find this time of year. But if any of those areas that we could possibly have some storage site and protect the wind blowing and snow blowing is going to be big for us. We've had some requests from public and commercial hauler or snow people for a place snow storage site. We're looking at possibilities. Some of the things would be, how would we operate that with the snow, plowing, anything. And so that's what we're possibly looking at. We continue to snow, a lot of requests for working on snow. Right now, our current sidewalk ordinance says that the must be installed within 72 hours. One thing that I did notice, she sent to me in Denmark, they have a 24-hour notice to finish sidewalk. They did suspend that. I'm not asking to suspend that, but I'm thinking that if our severe snowstorms keep getting snow, we're going to really run out of areas to store the snow, and it's going to take us a while to haul the snow. That's something that the commission needs to think about. Some areas, yes, we want to open, but is it something we can get snow at this level of snow that we consider suspending for an amount of time?
I think that would warrant it. I have a feeling all the medical people to out there enforcing this.
We're on the problem. It's somebody calls, right now, I think that keep getting calls, we're not enforcing that we need to put suspension. So, we're working on like I said before, we're on a fire in the utility, with utilities. We had that ready before the storm actually started this year. We're going to make some changes. We're trying to sort that out as a little separate. Some people are still confused on who to call and what to do. So trying to get some better information out to everybody. We are using Facebook quite a bit more, which is good. I've been a lot of comments on that. We are tracking every call coming in public works. If you call that answer right away, that doesn't mean we forgot about you. We're still going through and trying to get all those done. So if you call public works, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 9, please leave a message. We were tracking all those. Have any concerns, we will get to it. We're also, I think we're caught up on removing the bridges on the end of the driveways. We've been for elderly handicap. You can call public works, we will get that out of the first storm. We didn't have the staff on that to do that. We're inundated, but now we're getting some of those areas. And that's all I have to say.
I have a question. So, if we're storing on the situation where it's last storm, how are we going to handle it with the apartment owners, condo owners, business lots, parking lots? There's less room in the streets now, and a lot of them positive people lots into the street. How are we going to handle that?
We have picked up lots of downtown, right, 80,000 cubic yards. We pick them around the hospital and schools. There are residential areas, there are other areas, parking lots that if we get snow, we're going to remove that snow somehow. If we don't continue to get snow, we're going to try to get all the parking lots picked up. Some of these other areas, some subdivisions that are extremely large areas, so we're not getting the streets. And unfortunately, some of those we're going to have to form that with a loader bucket at the time to get rid of at least around the intersections in some areas around the apartments. If we continue to get snow, I think we'll have to get contracts on that out. If it's safety concern and emergency, plowing snow, we'll have to get contracts.
So if the contractor put it on the street, if we have manpower and time available, we can remove it. But if that's not a problem, it's got to be the apartment owner or condo owners, business owners, remove their snow and haul it out of there. Right? We can't go to those places and remove that. It's going to be an issue. We've got a few streets, it's down to one. And
I do appreciate that, Mr. Snyder, because when you have snow on the street, we don't need to put any more on it. And I think that's some of the questions I have. If they want to know where they haul to.
I think we need to look at expanding where contractor can go. I mean, it's going to be private business or partner that's going to have contract work to get there. But I think you need to have the ability. And I think you guys are asked for that looking at every place.
Well, that's not top land. They can contact us, we can let the contractor know where. He can make whatever deal he wants with them for a little bit better on the line.
If there's that possibility, we have some city land we're considering, but we would have to staff to the pile. With all this snow, there is, for quite an interest with myself, even with all the snow, the more we can now, the less I have to go with so.
Also, my concerns too is, minimal snow, the snow is, the other by too, is the garbage in or trash is not just the pile, and that we're just dumping in certain areas, cleanup to happen in spring. So that's my concern too. At least trying to make sure that we're not getting a mixture of garbage and snow on some of our properties.
Would an option be the land that was used by the National Guard for their equipment? Is vehicle put on their areas like that?
They're in release, so that would have to be negotiated with out there, so.
I think we have areas looking at some of the fire training off of Page Street. It is a farm ground, ready to probably be good. That's one of the things about the snow, to have a whole water. So we're considering that as a site, we monitor these difficulties.
We might break down how much actual brine is captured in that. We probably don't know. I just didn't know behind that land. It was something like snow, especially the prop line. If it's damn close, and then move it to us, getting east this way. Since they're very
minimal.
And there's that land, I know what you're talking about.
If you have any questions, please let Sean know and Nino, and we're trying to reply to insurance questions, comments, and fully improve. And so that's training, there's actual events that we're doing.
And the question I did forward to you, and Chief's here too, he can maybe address some of this bigoted cars, right? I called out bigoted cars, orange tickets, and I think Mr. Rock clarified there was some misunderstanding, because somebody called in by part of the twice, by the vote yet, and the response when they called it before was, I vote, I think that was clarified, there was a miscommunication, wasn't private, so, and that whole thing was well, it's private, like, I'm not getting people, so, but I think that was clear, so.
One thing I can be a little false, I haven't sanded the street, we don't sand the street, first time I would think there was some question about why I haven't sanded that, during that day when I did see that follow, we sanded 5 times already that day, it's because of the traffic, and so we are out sanding that whatever, and it's hard to keep track of every intersection now, that we're trying to deal with.
Well, we talked about this earlier, last week and a half, in Bismarck, Billings, Montana, and that would, of course, be improving our streets and take those communities. Billings, 20th of the snow, they do not even go into the residential areas. So I think the crews are.
I heard a lot of good things, a lot of people calling.
We'll continue to work on it and move forward.
Any questions for Mr. Roth? Move on planning, Planning Hadley, downtown overlay district, ordinance 1628.
Yes, Mr. President, downtown overlay district deals with existing homes in the downtown area. What it's meant to do is preserve and enhance and promote the use of those homes in the future, instead of basically requiring or wanting them to go away. Right now, we have good use for that. Various kind of transition zones in the downtown, and other parts of the community. The preservation of those allow mixed use of single-family residential and then the use of possibly commercial use in that same structure, as long as we met the building codes. This is the second reading, ordinance 1628. Staff would recommend approval and have no changes to this.
Any questions from the commission for Mr. Hadley? Hearing none, I will open up that public hearing. If anyone has any concerns, questions for 1628, please come forward. State your name and your concern to the commission. Seeing none from the public, we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Hadley from the commission? Not moved for a motion.
Motion to approve second reading and final passage of ordinance number 1628.
Motion to approve second reading, final passage. Second. Mr. Vogt, Mr. Alden. Aye. Mr. Riddick. Aye. Mr. Steiner. Aye. Ms. Jennings.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We have nothing from Mr. Schmidt. Commission, do you have anything you would like to bring up to the public or doing staff? Any commissioners?
Mr. President, I have a question in regards to where we're at in the hiring process of the city attorney position.
Good questions. Carlson? Or I guess, Snowy.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners, we did first round of interviews with the exception of one person who has some scheduling difficulties. We still have that interview scheduled. I believe it's next week. So we will finish our last interview for the first round, and then we'll make a decision on where we're going to go from there.
Who was involved in the hiring committee?
The first round, we had Chief Basinger, Chief Seebach, Larry Zuroff, Sean Kessel, and myself.
I know the city has seen some negativity as of lately, and I consider myself, I feel like we feel a lot of the loop at times and hear about it on social media or from phone call. So is it possible to have the commissioners, such as Mayor Decker, involved in some of these, especially at city attorney with such a close position that we work in, and really put all of our trust in? Is it possible to have commissioners sit?
And that is the plan for the city.
We actually did that, it was in line last round. And so once you get past the initial interviews and you're starting to narrow down, then the commissioners
Yep.
get involved in the planning process.
And that is the plan for the second interview. Okay. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Any other comments or concerns from commissioners? We'll open up the public. If there's any public issues or concern on the agenda, please come forward, state your name for the public, and let the commission know what your concerns are. Seeing no one from the public, has any concerns, I would look for a motion to adjourn. Second? Anyone? Second?